Hey everybody, we're live. You're listening to Restore the Republic, the voice of the people who's had enough. Enough of corrupt judges, enough of the rogue cops, enough of the lawyers who twist the law and the politicians who trample it. This is a show that dares to ask what happened to our de jure American government and how do we get it back. I'm your host, Sheriff Andrew Ike on the unincorporated Richland County, Ohio. And every week we expose the lies and decode the legal traps and empower you to reclaim your what's rightfully yours. No fluff, no compromise, just fact. Let's get into it. With me, as always, Sheriff Adam Bonner, unincorporated County Summit. How you doing, Adam?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing good. Running around. Busy. It's real busy, you know. We got a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. I'll tell you what, in my county right now, the de facto, they got things so messed up. You know, you got teachers in uproar. You got, you know, they're striking. They call it a bell-to-bell strike, where they're just showing up right before the bell and leaving as soon as they hear the ending bell. And we got problems with the mayor and, you know, just a conundrum of all kinds of things. It's crazy, you know, and these people, I wish they would start watching this. You know, I try to get out in the public as much as possible, and they just got to understand what's going on. You know, these people in the de facto government just running wild. We've got to change this shit. It's getting worse and worse. You got anything like that going on up your way?
You know, I mean, I've got several things going on, lots of investigative stuff going on, people out researching. It'll never stop. I mean, Summit County that's one of the biggest areas in the state that has, you know, a lot of issues. It's been going on for a long time, since just prior to World War II, from my findings. But it's always been because of the college and the law schools there through Akron University, and then the Bar Association downtown being there, you know, for over 100 years. It's just a cesspool, you know, waiting to happen.
I think that is the word of the day, you know, cesspool. Each one of these states of the union just got de facto government that's just, the local governments are cesspools. The state government's a cesspool. This stuff's becoming quickly a joke, and people are starting to really recognize it. Well, anyways, we're going to talk about today, you know, you've been hijacked. We've all been hijacked. You know, everything you think you knew about America is a complete and utter lie.
I agree.
The transformation, what's that?
Said I agree.
The transformation of the, you know, what was one of our government's contractors, the American government subcontractor, the Federal Republic, you know, it turned into, well, they didn't turn into, but the other two subcontractors turned into a democracy. And here we are going with that, you know. So we're going to kind of go back on the history a little bit about where this all began, or where the big majority of it began, because this has been going on since the late 1700s. But you know what? After we're going to call it the civil conflict in these union states we have, you know, all the people know it as the Civil War. But ever since then, you know, things just went to shit. The Reconstruction was supposed to happen. It partially happened. And, you know, we came up, well, the powers that be at that time came up with 4 Reconstruction Acts, you know, and they went from 1867 to 1868. So in a year span, they came up with 4 Reconstruction Acts. And these acts were passed by a radical Congress, basically, over President Andrew Johnson's vetoes. You know, they imposed military rule. They rewrote state constitutions, and they forced the southern states into a new federal mold. You know, there was so much corruptness going on at that time. So this is what we get out of it. So why don't you let the people know a little bit about these 4 Reconstruction Acts that on the books?
Well, it was first brought up when we were still somewhat de jure. September of 1866 is when it was supposed to kick off, but something happened. Might have been a stall curtailment from the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And the first Reconstruction Act, March 2nd of 1867, divided then the 10 unreconstructed southern states into, I think, 5 military districts. And from there, that required the states to draft a new constitution guaranteeing black male
Suffrage, right? Black male suffrage.
yeah. Well, I mean, either way, it led to conditioning reentry into the Union on ratifying the 14th Amendment. I'm just sitting there, I got all these things I'm recalling, and sure enough, times and dates, they sometimes conflict with other things that we read. Anyhow, this caused an aggressive take. This wasn't a reconstruction. It was more or less a foreign occupation, usurpation.
Yeah, we've went over many times that 14th Amendment and how, all you had, I'm so streamlined just to tell people, okay, this is what you do. Go here and look at that. Go to the congressional record. Look at these dates, when this stuff passed in 1866 and how Andrew Johnson vetoed, the states at that time did not ratify the 14th Amendment. It's
Right.
in there. You can read it. And somehow we still come out with this crap,
Well, it was a statutory thing at that point, because you got to figure after the incorporation of, the overlay of our de jure American government, where the statutory side came in, with all their legal fiction, this is and that's. They created, not only immunities for themselves, so we couldn't go after them, but yeah, I get it. But so they created all these immunities and stuff like that for themselves. And today they still try to pull the same stuff, talking about, that they have sovereign immunities. And no, you don't. Corporate fictions and corporate entities cannot, under statutory law, have, these types of things under Title 50, Sovereign Immunities Act. So, I mean, unless if we're talking about living men and women, I don't see how that fits. And I have yet to have an attorney or anybody, show me where it says that the people, agreed and consented to that and ratified it. Otherwise, they just did whatever they wanted to do. And that's what we keep coming back to. So anyhow, the second Reconstruction, March 23rd, 1867. So, it clarified voter registration procedures. It gave military commanders authority to oversee elections and remove officials. And generals became governors. Constitution was basically sidelined at that point. So we get into the third Reconstruction Act of July 19th, 1867. And this just further empowered military commanders to override civil authorities, and cemented federal control over local governance. Hence why they say now that, they're federal, even under statutory legal fiction nonsense, that it's the law of the land. Well, I beg to differ, because on the soil jurisdiction, on our counties, we're the law of the land. All that federal stuff's, Anyways.
franchise corporation crap, just handed down.
That's all. It exists on paper, and they got actors in place to make it appear a certain way.
Yeah, another thing I think about, though, when we talk about this down in them southern states that were getting reconstructed, the Reconstruction was being done by the North, who just won the war. So they was taking it out on these guys down there. They were running roughshod on every state, trying to basically put on a show to let them see that they were wrong or whatever, and yeah, they did a lot of bad things.
Oh, it still went from there after the war into even when, all the railroad companies were racing across the country and figuring out how to blast through mountains. And, there was a big race, but you still had, North and South soldiers finding each other, building these tracks and taking each other out along the way. And this is where not only do we have like different types of plantation police coming to be private security for the railroads, but they had their own private police.
Yeah.
So, if you go back 300 years and, you kind of work your way forward, that's kind of where a lot of that stuff came from, as far as policing goes.
Yeah, you talking about the Pinkertons? Isn't there some Pinkerton laws? Yeah.
Yep. So, we get into the Fourth Reconstruction Act, March 11th, 1868. This finalized the procedures for ratifying new state constitutions. It paved the way for readmission, but only under federal terms. And then reentry meant surrender. Sovereignty was the price that everybody paid for all of that.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to think about,
Right.
I mean,
so
to
the people
re-enter back into as your governing body, you have to surrender to them, which took away the sovereignty,
Well, like I said, where can you show me anywhere that, corporate fictions or entities that exist on paperwork and have actors, usurping and involved in all kinds of other crimes against the people, how can they have sovereignty and immunity claiming, some form of Title 50 or whatever they rewrote it into to, go along with their statutory whatever? It just doesn't fit,
Yeah.
Living men and women is what that is for. So,
well, along with those 4 Reconstruction Acts, the democracy replaced the Republican form of government, basically.
Right.
In their jurisdiction, that's what it did. In the textbooks and in people's speech, the same thing happened. They were trying to shove this stuff down everybody's throat. And just think about back then, there was no internet, there was no phones, there was no, well, cell phones anyways, but, nobody knew about what was going on. You'd have to either read it in a local paper that eventually got to you or, so they were ramming this stuff down everybody's throat,
Right.
And, today you can see, we mention this all the time, just up one of the contracts that we gave to our subcontractors, the constitutions. You can just open it up and look right in there. We are guaranteed a Republican form of government. In black and white, it's in there. So if it's in their contract and we don't have a Republican form of government, they are breaking the contract. It's pretty freaking simple,
Right. Yeah, the contract has been void for over 160 years. I mean, I remember learning about our state constitution that supposedly was, after a 100-year dispute from the 1850s, where we know that the original 1803 Constitution was rewritten and it was not ratified by the people. So conveniently, this famous 100 years goes by. We get up to 1966 and they start making a big stink out of it. Finally, everybody's already been long past incorporated and unlawfully converted into U.S. citizens. Now they're having U.S. citizens come back and ratify what was already fraudulent from the get-go because it was never ratified by the people.
Yeah.
So, we end up into these types of things. And if you do your research far enough back, you're going to find that all 50 states have similar stories and histories. So this isn't rocket science. I've heard professors speak about this stuff and, nothing ever gets done. Nobody ever, raises Cain about it because they don't want to lose their jobs and their stability, or they just don't want to disappear. So,
yeah. Well, along with the replacement of the republic, Republican form of government with a democracy. Common law gave way to statutory law, statutory law, administrative codes. And all that, we talk about this all the time. Statutory law and the codes and ordinances and stuff like that, it is all legislated by a foreign corporation. I try to explain this to people. They're not our government. There are employees, and we have our employees writing legislation and then trying to make their employer follow the legislation. Come on, people.
Yeah, that's intended for them. That's intended for them.
Yes, that statutory bullshit is intended for them and their employees. And their employees are U.S. citizens.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you control who writes the dictionaries and who does Black's Law and, and law goes into legal and, hundreds of years go by, I mean, I guess it's pretty easy to sweep all that under the rug until people start reading and, finding this stuff out for themselves.
Until the internet's invented,
Exactly.
And information starts getting shared. Well, yes. along with the statutory law, citizens became residents. I think that's one of the biggest key issues here, in my opinion. Because the word resident doesn't mean you're what you think it does. It means that you're just here. You're not supposed to be domiciled or permanently here. You're just holding a residency.
Well, as a U.S. citizen, that would be within the 10 square miles of D.C. Where it's not supposed to.
Think about it on this terms, because this is what I can tell people that don't comprehend what I'm saying. Motley Crue or Kiss, they'll hold a residence out in Vegas once in a while, a residency. They'll play at a hotel for a week or two. That's their residence. They're not part of that hotel. They don't live there. They just have a residence there for a couple of weeks, and then they're gone. It's like these U.S. citizens. You're residents here. You're not supposed to be here. And you know what? We were joking around before about, maybe we need to get our other employees, these ICE agents, to round up some of these U.S. citizens and get them out of our country, take them back to England where they belong. What do you think about that?
Right. Well, I think that anybody who gives allegiance to some type of corporate entity that's in another country under, the rule of crown, I think that, they should be booted back there, deported. I mean, is that not an act of insurrection against our lawful American de jure government? Seems like it to me. I mean,
it is. And, we can always.
I can't find anything that would contradict that. So,
what they tell you in the courtroom here in these C jurisdiction courts, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So now we're going to reverse that to these U.S. citizens and these corporate subcontractor governmental service providers of ours. We know the law. And if you're claiming ignorance of that law, tough shit,
Well, I believe it's ignorance of the law is not an excuse for a defense. That's what they do statutorily to anybody who doesn't know who they are, that you're not the all caps name that they probably threatened to be there to show up, to appear, hovering, amongst them, hovering through the bar, in spirit.
Yeah, we've explained a lot of this stuff before, but once in a while we got to repeat it because we got new people watching, and a lot of people forget it. But it's important, I mean, well, it's kind of important because what we're doing is we are bringing back the American government, on our counties, on our state. That's what we're doing, and it's in progress, and we're doing it. And then our next job is to, me and Adam talk about this all the time, is we have to unincorporate all this bullshit. We have to unincorporate the towns, the villages, We have to unincorporate our county, and then we have to eventually unincorporate the state, you know?
Well, I want to pump the brakes now and say that we don't have to do this right away. We're not just going to make them disappear. That's why
Yeah.
we're operating concurrently beside them. But we do hold general concurrent and superior jurisdiction over them. And that's one of the things that they don't comprehend. And statutorily, they have no authority. They have no standing to tell us that we can't, status correct or, reconstruct. So,
yeah, it's pretty simple to me. You know, I mean, all you got to do, I mean, we're the Americans. You're the U.S. citizens that are just residents here. Like you said, it's not rocket science. This stuff is pretty easy to grasp. But, so anyways, this is all a hidden coup, what they're trying to do to you after the Civil War, and then in 1871, when the Municipal Corporation Act that created the United States Corporation inside of DC, inside that District of Columbia, a federal citizenship invented, you became a subject of that corporation. You was no longer a sovereign on the land and soil, but they owned you. They owned you, and they were located in DC,
Right. The several other states weren't supposed to be affected by that. And you could find that in tons of older case law.
Yeah.
Before the incorporation.
Yeah. Well, they didn't just change the laws. They changed your identity. That's what they did. The laws are still there. They changed your identity to where you no longer fit inside that realm of certain laws.
Yes. Status correction is a self-governance choice. Do you want to be governed by your foreign subcontractor agents and their franchise agents and so on and so on? Or do you want to self-govern and take care of your own affairs, your own progeny? You don't want to contract with the state when you get married that you have a right to have a common law marriage and not have any state interference, especially not de facto state, because you will be subjected to all of their, punishable offenses that are usually victimless crimes that are attached to some type of code, statute, or ordinance. And that shouldn't be being enforced onto Americans, onto living men and women. So that's just a little bit of information for you.
Yeah.
Postmasters, can we elaborate? We'll probably get into that maybe if we have time at the end. But, make no mistake about it, our founding fathers they're youthful rebels, I mean, these guys had balls to clink, and they weren't taking any of the shenanigans, anybody coming over in red coats or anybody telling them how it was going to be. I mean, this was their land. And, for instance, Thomas Jefferson was 33. This is just an average age breakdown. James Madison was 25. Alexander Hamilton was 21. Marquis de Lafayette was 19. These guys were hard chargers. Muskets back then weighed about 48 pounds. They were almost 6 foot, almost 7 foot tall with the bayonet on it. Could you imagine having to carry that and all of your powder and just think about that? I mean, that can get pretty heavy after a couple miles. So
yeah, well, that's something that a lot of people forget. Most of these guys that signed the Declaration and was going forward with trying to start this experiment known as America, after we won the war and everything, they were young men. And you might see not pictures, but paintings, drawings, and you think that they're older guys, and they were young men. And I think that we really need more of that in our government, in our government that we're restoring right now. We need the younger generation. I would say 30 to 35 would be a great age to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, part of self-governance is re-educating yourself, relearning, and filling in the blanks of the breadcrumb history and English and whatever else. Math is even an illusion. So by the time you get down to it, I mean, you're probably getting a quarter, of truth, and you've got to go back and re-educate and constantly be educating throughout your life. Um, we're finding this isn't just our generation, it's generations after us, after Gen X. I'm noticing the decline in, once they graduate, if they don't go to college or trade school, there's no continued education. They just go from job to job. And we know that retirements don't really exist anymore. The turnover rate's ridiculous. You just can't hold jobs the way that you used to be able to. Like people from, back when probably around the time we were born, back then you could drop out of school and get into a trade and work 40 years, 30, 40 years and get a pension. Those days are done. I mean, this system and their agenda is what killed that. There is no American dream. Now, unless if you invest and you're smart with your money.
Oh Lord, here we
But
go
even
with that.
then,
All that
even then,
investing is one. I thought about this earlier, and here you are bringing it up. The banks. The
yeah,
banks are
yeah.
these bankers. They're
Hey,
crooks.
check this comment out.
Real estate, Wall Street, crooks. Our federal subcontractors, crooks. This shit is crazy. Everybody's crooks. And here is the normal people sitting back watching this crap go down, and everybody talks. That's the one thing I've been trying to say forever. Everybody just keeps talking and talking and talking, putting their Facebook pictures out. It takes more than that, people. You got to get
Well, I think
involved. You have to get involved.
they've created such a financial travesty on everybody that everybody's living out of scarcity now. They don't the paycheck to paycheck. The middle class has pretty much been horsewhipped through all this hoax and COVID stuff up to this point. Inflation, of home values and taxation for property tax, and really it's just greedy piggies wanting more and more money. And who's footing the bill? The taxpayer.
Well, once again, you open
Yeah.
your simple Constitution, look at one of the contracts that we gave them. The only the currency should be is gold and silver. But yet somehow we get these green pieces of paper that aren't worth crap.
No,
And everybody
they massacred that probably 4 or 5 years ago. It was done. I think the last time I looked, it was worth like 12 cents. It's probably not even worth the paper.
Well, you know what? I had an interesting talk today with my dad, and we were talking about how fiat currency, it's almost dead. So what's the next newest biggest thing coming up? Crypto, tokens, coins,
Digital ID.
more fiat. That's a bunch of BS. They're doing the same trick to the people over again, just changing the little, instead of $1, now it's crypto token.
Right.
It's not physical. You can't touch it. You can't have it in your possession. It's the same. God, boy, I want to.
There's so many XRP. Yeah, crypto is one of the most unstable. It's just scary. I mean, XRP, all the coins. There's so many scams going on.
It's not even that. It's all set up already against the people.
Right.
It's these bad actors piggyback. Every time something goes down, they steal your money from crypto.
Yeah, there's so many people that get robbed investing in crypto. It's not even funny. And they didn't start really doing anything about it until just this past year. It was set up to where through arbitration, you had to go over to England, for most of the arbitrating. And you couldn't do anything here in the States because most of the way their hubs are set up, all of their stuff is through like some other place overseas. So inconveniently some place where, you can't touch them through international claims,
Yeah,
they're out of reach.
there's
So,
no hope. There's no hope. It's the bankers, it's the hedge funds. They're all in it together. They got, the watchdog is the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. They don't give a shit. Above them, you got Powell and, Trump. It's one big sack of shit, really. So good luck to anybody that's in the market. But anyways, we get back on track about these counties and unincorporating them. Incorporation kind of equals subjugation. Counties and states as corporate franchises under a federal control. But unincorporation kind of equals liberation, restoring local sovereignty and common law jurisdiction. That's what we need. Here's some steps to unincorporate. We talk about this all the time. Change your political status. Very easy thing to do. Join your county assembly or your state assembly, either one. Help out in each and get things going. Just an easy 3-step process anyone can do. Get out of the matrix, become American again. Your local government's pretty much a puppet, and it's time to cut the strings. It's time to lead the people in the right direction.
absolutely. I mean, on top of all of this bad acting and people waking up and realizing that they're being harmed by their subcontractors, this has caused psychological effects on people, harm, I mean, through this hijacking, it has literally caused anguish, mental anguish, duress. We're all being coerced, do this, that, or the other, or else. Pretty soon, people are just going to start going, they're going to start throwing their hands in the air. And, we're kind of like in this peculiar phenomenon that, we're so new to this. We're just now reclaiming, our offices that have been vacated for decades, 6 generations. And people aren't really comprehending that across the country. They don't realize what it is. They're just, you guys are wearing cute costumes. Listen, Timmy, your mother likes my hat. Okay. Go read some books.
Well, you know what, Adam? Basically, what the people just do not comprehend is the American government, our government, not the U.S. government, the American government has always been here since 1776. It's always been here, even before that, but it's always been here. After the Reconstruction Acts that we were talking about, they were just not, people didn't fill in the spots. It was just kind of interregnum.
Right.
It wasn't bad.
Adjourn.
There was just not people that told they got to reconstruct that part of the government. Well, so here we are picking up the pieces. That's all we're doing.
The last session that they had before the incorporations, started to, we got a left and right hand side issue where the majority of the Republicans stormed out. And so the Democrats divided themselves to split the aisles. So basically the Dems usurped a long time ago, just after the second session of 1861.
Yeah.
So, from that point on, it was slowly going downhill, because now you got people that were once Dems, now acting as Republicans, and you have a president who hadn't been assassinated yet, who literally usurped his power as the commander in chief to call a special session, because the previous one, where the North and South got into a squabble and they all just left and there wasn't a proper adjournment, that's where things became in regnum. So you got, your Confederation of States and your Federation of States just said, F it, and they couldn't come to terms. And that's when the usurpation and the legal fiction and the Lieber Code and all of these things slowly happened. And then the
You know
guy
what,
that
Phil?
created the stuff.
I'm so happy with this American government. I'm taking it in so much because it kind of naturally fixes all the issues. When you just worry about yourself, your sovereignty, the Republican form of government, your rights, your rights that you have. Everybody has them. There are no sides. There is no left and right. There is no blue and red. All this bullshit that goes on in DC and that even in our communities. I see people and meet people, and I'm sure you all know them. They'll be Republican and diehard. It doesn't matter if they have someone they're voting for that's a piece of crap. They have to vote for them because they're that party. There are no parties in the American government. That's the best thing about this. Individual rights.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is it's two wings of the same bird. But there's a hidden meaning behind that. But by the time you get into all of the the various things that get up to the head of the beast, it's ridiculous.
Well, I always think of the other end. The two wings of the same bird, but it's the same shit coming out of them. That's how I think.
Well, have you ever noticed? 45 years on the earth, and all I've ever seen is, they promise all these things and get the votes. Midnight comes around, they got a dream team of attorneys and assistants, go back and rewrite it, and then nothing ever gets done that they promised. Maybe one thing.
Oh, Adam, I love it. I love your thinking because I think the same way. You know what? I watched this Vivek Ramaswamy going around, his campaign for Ohio's governor, and he wants to make Ohio the best. Every governor in every campaign said the same thing. And they all say they want to clean up this and do that, and bunch of
we're never going to be the heartbeat of America ever again.
Yeah,
there's just too much capitalist gain to take things out of the country.
No, I know.
So
Vivek's in for money. He's got corporations in Ohio. Yeah,
no, of course he has a vested interest, just like all the.
So Vivek, if you're watching this, or if anybody can get this out to him, tell him to talk to us. Tell him to get a hold of us. We're actually his employer, or soon to be employer if he gets that job as governor.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
So back to these psychological tricks, man.
Yeah. So, it trickled down to the education system. Obviously we all know what happened there with the Rockefellers investing into a foundation and then eventually, funding boards of education and then eventually telling them what they can and can't teach. And, over the past 125 years, 120 years, whatever, what was it, 1906 when all that began, by 1912, somewhere in there, just before 1913 when all hell broke loose. Yeah, so if you go back to then and go from then up to now and see all of the things that they used to teach versus what they teach now, kids aren't really benefiting from public education the way that they used to back in the day. Right now, they're just being taught to be good test takers, to get high scores in the district, to get more federal funding and grant money.
Yeah, basically. And you know what? That it really ain't even working out that well.
It's really not.
They're not being good test takers. A lot of districts.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. And these teachers, they're so scared of getting lawsuits against them. You have to know that it's a mental illness to let somebody in their adolescent years identify as a cat and then put a litter box in the hallway for them.
Yeah. It's the trickle down theory, man. They're worried about that. They're also worried about not teaching these kids what they should have because the state's mandating this, federal's mandating to the state's mandating to the schools, and they just got to follow in line or they lose their job, and
right.
It's just unreal. This shit is unreal.
I get it. Some of them do have good heads on their shoulders, but a lot of them are you can just
Oh, I
see that
agree, but they're not gonna change. They're not gonna stand up for the right thing because they'll lose their
right.
job. And
Well, I
that's
mean, the
what,
big majority
when
of
we
them,
unincorporate these counties, that's going to be a winner right there.
yeah, yeah, the big majority of them, they're just kind of going with it. But the ones that are, practicing mental illness and getting paid to do that, putting your kids in harm's way and causing them to have anxiety issues or depression, or maybe they feel like they're being hazed and bullied. And, these grown-ups aren't really stepping in. Back in our day, I remember a yardstick being used, or getting sent to the office and getting a leather paddle. So, I don't know if that's ever going to come back, but we'll see. I
Yeah,
think we're going to have to start making some visits to boards, more boards.
exactly. But back to the
But yeah,
psychological, you were talking about the education system.
well, it's gotten into media manipulation. Everywhere you go, there's all these different algorithms, that go along with different ideologies or different responses. Everything is calculated and then taken, and they run the numbers on it. They do the analytics, and they're just pumping propaganda, or if you're actually telling truth that they can fact check and find out that it's truth, they'll just silence you. There will just be nothing but issues. You'll keep getting rebooted, or you'll keep getting looped. You won't actually be able to use that
Yeah,
platform.
we've
I've
all seen
noticed
it.
that happen a lot.
We've all seen it. We've all seen over the last 5 years of people calling disinformation and misinformation, and it's
Right.
all just to mess with everybody's heads. Nobody knows what's
Yeah.
right. Nobody knows what's wrong. We got kids thinking they're cats, and guys thinking they're girls,
Literally.
and girls thinking they're guys, and
Yeah.
what a
Well, so I mean, it trickled into into our law system, and now we got legalese versus plain English, which is a violation against the basic rules of communication. The basic laws of communication is one word should have one meaning.
yeah.
It shouldn't be, do you understand? And your comprehension of the word understand that you learned in school means that you comprehend what somebody said. In their legal fiction realm, it means that you stand under their authority and submit to their jurisdiction, which I do not, and they can kiss my ass. So that's one of those type of things where, if you really look at all of the things, and make a list, it adds up into this aggressive thing where if you're actually following it and tracking it, then you have some type of logic in your head. You should realize that they didn't just steal your country. Now they've caused brain rot. They stole your mind from you.
Oh Lord,
They're keeping
Operation
you in
Mind
fear.
Crime. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah,
anyways, we got to
organized
get back on the
surveillance.
path of reclamation. We got to start changing our statuses and building our assemblies and rejecting these federal that benefits. That's one of the big things. A lot of people, some people don't want to self-govern. They enjoy the
True.
benefits. They enjoy having Big Brother be over top of them. I've never
Well,
been that way. I will never be that way. But
you've heard the statement "back the blue until it happens to you," right?
yeah,
Well, everybody wants to benefit, from whatever services they're offering until something happens where they're being forced into joinder for profit. They're not nonprofits like they claim they are. That's,
yeah.
hey, show me your books. Let's do the accounting audit.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. I see it. I see it a lot too. All these signs out in people's yards. We back the police and we back back the blue, and it's great until you tell them no on any kind of roadside stop. You tell them no, and you're going to get your window busted out. And
I'm just talking about the revenue on the private side of
oh
the
yeah,
ledgering. There hasn't been audits or any proper accounting done on those in 160 years. I mean, I would like to see what the deficit that they ran up looks like, because that's our credit that they stole from us.
Yeah,
We are
I
the
know.
principal of the
They're also
interest.
occupying the public's buildings, our buildings.
Right. Yeah, we've paid for them for generations. However long they've been there, we've paid for them that many more times over,
Yeah.
year wise. So,
Well, you got to reject them federal benefits and remember that you don't need permission to be free. You just need courage. There's nothing to be afraid of. When you know who you are, when you stand on the land and soil as an American, nothing can take you down.
well,
We know we're right. We got everything on our side. It's history.
you can waive the benefits and reject them on offer. I mean, obviously, they're trying to get you to identify as something that you're not. And ideally, if they're actually going to give remedy instead of trying to play 21 questions to try and get jurisdiction through some type of acquiescence when you don't even get full disclosure to what game they're freaking playing. So that's just one of the most deceiving Ponzi schemes that you're ever going to learn about, at least here. I'm sure there's other truthers out there talking about various versions of it. We try to keep it simple, just to help people kind of absorb at at a steady pace instead of throwing too much at you. That's why we just do certain topics, to build layers for your arsenal.
Exactly.
And then go from
Well, you
there.
know what, Adam? I was thinking. I thought of this earlier today, and you know how I was talking about. I think we need. Well, we need anyone. We need all the people to become American again. That's what we need. But I was thinking for our government services that we provide as the American government, we need the younger crowd. We need the 30-year-olds. We need these people they're less indoctrinated because they're younger. They haven't been through this system longer than the older people. They're younger, so they're less indoctrinated, but they still understand most of their life is in this realm of internet, computers, cryptocurrency. They know this stuff. They know what's going on and how to combat it. So we need to really get out to these younger people. So what I was thinking is, it's that group, Turning Point, that Charlie Kirk's Turning Point. I think we ought to try doing something similar, going out to colleges and speaking to these kids about what's really going on, about the real America.
We could. I mean, we're slowly doing that. I mean, you'll get a lot of Gen Zers and even the majority of the millennials. Like I said, the majority of them didn't really progress to secondary education after high school. To get any type of, skilled trade or anything like that, it takes a lot of self-discipline to be able to really study and research to undo what has been done to you through your K through 12. And their education's different these days than back when we went to school. We had at least more history, civics, different types of things pertaining to government. It's not that way so much anymore. So,
yeah.
I do agree that they're more technologically advanced because they don't have paper books anymore, hardbound books. They have laptops that they use to listen into your homes, and then
and that's another thing. I think, well, times have changed, but a lot of the important stuff are in them books. Especially when I went to school, it just came when I got into high school. We had U.S. history, but we also had American history. Two separate books, two separate jurisdictions. But at the time, at that age, I was thinking, this doesn't make sense. How can there be a divide like this? Why is there a U.S. history and an American history? Isn't it the same thing? And then you always have people, well, no, America's South America, North. It ain't about that. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I got a book from, I think, 1802 called Ohio's History. And it was given to me by a lady that was 101. My mom used to take care of her back in the early 80s. She come from a long line of attorneys, go figure, and educators. And her husband's law library was just insane. It was the size of probably my whole basement. I mean, it was just, covered all the new law books and stuff like that. Just everything and anything, a lot of historic material.
Yeah.
And she always used to go grab that book when we would be over there, and she loved reading to us. Because sometimes me and my brothers would go if it was on like a weekend or something, and we would have story time. Well, she ended up giving me that book before she passed, and I'll tell you what, it looks way different than what they teach now. I mean, they leave out so much stuff. It's ridiculous.
I bet. Well, I hope everybody got something out of today's episode. Let's head on out of here. Just remember, people, this isn't just about you. It's about your children, your community, your country. Their system only works if you stay asleep. So wake up, stand up, and speak up for the love of God. Adam, you want to give a shout out to any of your social media? Adam?
I was going to say, look for us tomorrow. We're going to be on the Reef Shop Talk 44.
All right. Remember, Restore the Public on YouTube. Hey, you guys, we do have anybody wants to donate, we got a Cash App, $APC140. It's always coming in. It always helps, but if not, no big deal. And for more information, if you guys want to check out the pktfnews.org, it's got a lot of great information. ClaimYourInheritance.info or the TASA site, tasa.americanstatenaturals.org. All this stuff will help you out. Let's take our country back. Anything else, Adam?
Yeah, just look for us over on the other channels tomorrow. We'll probably get a couple new videos out on Rumble.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for stopping by. We'll be back. We appreciate you all. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And if you guys are watching this on Facebook or LinkedIn, get your butts over to YouTube and subscribe, please. All right, we'll see you later. Thanks a lot, Adam.